Shane Walker never expected to find a woman passed out next to a black Mercedes in the parking lot of a rundown grocery store at 9:30 on a Tuesday night. He pulled his 10-year-old pickup truck into the far corner space, unbuckled his 5-year-old daughter from her booster seat, and turned only to freeze. A woman in a navy suit was lying motionless across the pavement, her heels tossed beside her like she'd kicked them off mid-collapse. "Gwen, stay in the truck," Shane said quickly, tossing his hoodie over the driver's seat and jogging toward the woman. "Don't move, okay?" His daughter nodded, wide-eyed, clutching her stuffed dinosaur. Shane knelt beside the woman, checking for a pulse. It was there fast but steady. Her breathing was shallow, her face pale, and a strand of dark hair clung to her cheek, damp with sweat. Her blazer had a sleek designer label inside, and her watch looked expensive. She didn't belong in this part of town. "Ma'am," he said, tapping her shoulder gently. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, hazel and glassy. "Water," she croaked. "I got you," Shane said, pulling a bottle from his truck's cup holder. He helped her sit up slowly, supporting her back. "Drink this, but take it easy." She sipped the water, then blinked like she was trying to remember where she was. "Where?" "You passed out," Shane said, watching her closely. "You okay?" I think so." She looked around, dazed. "My car, right there," he nodded. "You parked just fine." "I'm Shane. My kid's in the truck. You want me to call someone? An ambulance?" "No," she said quickly, shaking her head. "No hospitals, I'm fine. I skipped breakfast and lunch and maybe dinner." He raised an eyebrow. "You passed out from not eating." "I had meetings all day," she muttered, still breathing heavily. "Didn't realize how drained I was." "You're lucky I found you." She looked at him then. Really looked. His flannel shirt had a rip in the sleeve, his jeans were worn, and his boots had seen better days. But his eyes were warm, steady, safe. "I owe you," she said. "You don't owe me anything," Shane replied simply. "Just glad you're okay. You sure you don't want me to call someone?" "No." "I'll be fine." She tried to stand, but her legs wobbled. Shane caught her before she collapsed again. "All right, that's it," he said, scooping her up without asking. She gasped, but he ignored it. "You're not driving anywhere. I'll take you home." "I don't even know you," she protested. "Then we're even," he said. "Because you sure don't know you can walk right now either. Besides, my daughter's watching, and I don't want her thinking we leave people behind." She fell silent in his arms. Back at the truck, Shane gently opened the passenger door and helped her inside, adjusting the seatbelt. Gwen peeked over the console. "Daddy, who's she?" Shane gave her a tired smile. "Someone who needs help, baby, be nice." The woman turned to the little girl. "I'm Tessa. Thank you for sharing your daddy tonight." Gwen giggled. The drive was quiet. Shane glanced over at her as they passed the city limits. "Where's home?" "Upper East Side," she said softly, then hesitated. "But just drop me at the Fairmont Hotel downtown." "I'll call a car from there." Shane frowned. "You sure?" "Yes." He pulled up to the glowing entrance of the 5-star hotel. The valet approached, eyeing his truck with suspicion, but Tessa waved him off and turned to Shane. "I mean it, thank you." "For everything. Eat something," he said, handing her the rest of the water. She hesitated, then looked at him, really looked. "You have no idea who I am, do you?" "Nope," she smiled faintly. "That's kind of nice." And with that, she turned, walking into the hotel lobby like nothing had happened. Shane watched her disappear, shrugged, and drove off into the night. 3 days later, Tessa Fairchild sat in her corner office on the 53rd floor of Fairchild and Lane Enterprises, staring at the manila folder in front of her. "Ma'am," her assistant said, "you asked for a background check on the man from Tuesday night." Tessa nodded. The assistant carefully placed the folder on her desk and left. She opened it slowly. Shane Walker. 33, mechanic, single dad, no criminal record, lives in a 2-bedroom rental with his daughter, income under $35,000 a year. Tessa closed the folder and leaned back in her chair. A mechanic, a single dad, a man who lifted her like she weighed nothing, who didn't ask for anything in return, who didn't even blink when she said Upper East Side. He didn't know who she was, didn't care. She couldn't stop thinking about him. That weekend, Shane was under the hood of a Lexus at the auto shop where he worked when someone tapped him on the shoulder. He turned and nearly dropped his wrench. Tessa stood there in jeans, a white blouse and sunglasses. She looked nothing like the woman who passed out in the parking lot. You, Shane said, surprised. Me, she smiled. I owe you lunch and I always pay my debts. You really didn't have to, I know. That's why it means something. Shane wiped his hands on a rag, heart thudding. Gwen was spending the afternoon with her grandma, which meant for once he had no excuse. All right, he said. Let me grab my jacket. Tessa waited by his truck. Same truck, she teased. Only one I've got, he replied. She smiled wider. Good. I like honest things. As they pulled out of the lot, he asked, so what do you do? She hesitated. Let's just say I run a company. What kind? Real estate, investments, a little of everything, he nodded. Sounds fancy, she glanced at him. It is. But sometimes it's exhausting. They ate at a local diner, cheap burgers, fries, milkshakes. Tessa didn't complain once. So, he said after a while, why are you really here? She looked at him, all humor gone. Because I haven't stopped thinking about you. And I don't usually pass out in parking lots, or get carried around by strangers, or get driven home by men with daughters who look at them like they hung the moon. Shane blinked. I'm not asking for anything, she continued, but I had to see you again. He stared at her a long moment. Then quietly said, You're not what I expected. Good, she replied. Neither are you. Shane didn't know what surprised him more, that she came back or that she stayed. They'd had lunch, but then she asked if he had plans. And when he said he needed to pick up Gwen from his mother's house, Tessa asked if she could come along. Her voice held no judgment, just quiet curiosity. So he said yes. And now she stood next to him on the cracked porch of his childhood home, watching as Gwen ran out the front door still wearing a sparkly paper crown. Daddy, she cried, hugging his waist. Nana made cookies. Tessa crouched down to Gwen's level. Hi again. Gwen studied her. Are you a princess too? Tessa blinked. Why would you think that? You're wearing shiny shoes, Gwen said, pointing at the beige heels. Tessa laughed, then knelt lower. Well, I'm not a princess, but I do run a castle, sort of. Gwen's eyes widened. You have dragons, only the board of trustees, Tessa whispered, making Gwen giggle. Inside, Shane's mother handed him a container of leftovers and gave Tessa a long, silent look before turning to Shane. She's pretty, she said under her breath. You tell her about your schedule yet? No, you should. Tessa accepted the container with a polite thank you before walking with Shane and Gwen back to the truck. Your mom's protective, she said once they were on the road. She raised 3 boys alone after my dad left. Protective doesn't begin to cover it. She's got good instincts, he glanced at her. You always this forward, she didn't answer right away. Not with most people. After they dropped Gwen off at a friend's birthday party, Shane drove them to the edge of town where the hills rolled back into open sky. He parked at a lookout point that only locals knew about. The wind tousled her hair as she stepped out of the truck and looked around. You can see the whole valley from here, she said quietly. I come here when I need to think, Shane said, leaning against the truck bed. She turned to him. You're not like anyone I know. That a good thing, it's a real thing. They stood in silence for a moment, the breeze carrying scents of pine and dust. Then she asked, what happened to Gwen's mom? She left when Gwen was 2, said she couldn't do small-town life anymore. Took a job in Dallas. I haven't heard from her since. Tessa's lips pressed together. That must have been hard. It was worse for Gwen, he said, but she's tougher than people think. Tessa didn't say anything for a while. Then out of nowhere she asked, do you believe in timing? He looked at her. Like fate? No, timing. As in 2 people might be perfect for each other, but meet at the absolute worst moment. I think if they're really perfect for each other, they'll make it the right moment. Tessa looked away. I wish that were always true. Shane didn't press. He could feel the wall go up in her voice, subtle but sure. Instead, he reached into the truck bed and pulled out a blanket. You cold? Freezing. He draped it around her shoulders, and she didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned back against the truck and tilted her head toward him. What if I said I wasn't used to people doing things for me without wanting something in return? She asked. I'd say you've been around the wrong people. Her eyes searched his face. You're not going to ask me what I'm worth. No, you're not even curious. He shook his head. Money doesn't impress me. Character does. She let out a breath like she'd been holding it for too long. I wasn't always like this, she said. I used to wait tables at a beach bar in college. lived in a one-bedroom apartment with 3 roommates. Then everything changed when my father died. He left me the company and a mountain of pressure I wasn't ready for. Did you want it? No, she said softly. But I couldn't let it fall apart. I had to prove I could do it, and once I did, I couldn't stop. I built it bigger, stronger. But somewhere along the way, I forgot what I was even building it for. He didn't say anything, just listened. I don't know why I'm telling you this, she said, maybe because I'm not part of that world. She looked at him, something raw in her gaze. Exactly. They stayed there until the sun dipped behind the hills. Her phone buzzed, but she didn't check it. I should go, she said. I'll drive you. They didn't speak on the way back. The silence wasn't awkward, it was settled, like they'd said what they needed to. When they reached the hotel, she hesitated before getting out. I want to see you again. You know where to find me. She started to open the door, then paused. There's a gala next Saturday. It's a charity event, black tie, big donors, I'm hosting. He raised a brow. You want me to be your date. I want you to see my world, she said, just once. I don't own a tux. I'll handle that. He studied her. You sure you want me there? I've never been more sure of anything. She got out and walked toward the entrance. This time she turned back. I'll send a car. He watched her disappear into the golden-lit lobby, then drove off, already wondering what the hell he'd just agreed to. Shane adjusted the black bow tie for the 3rd time and gave up. This thing's strangling me, he muttered. Mrs. Ramirez, the tailor who'd hemmed his borrowed tux, clicked her tongue and swatted his hand away. Stop fidgeting. You look like a movie star. I look like I'm pretending to be someone else. She pinned the last button on his cuff. You're not pretending. You're just visiting. Shane exhaled and glanced at his reflection. He barely recognized himself. Clean shave, polished shoes, jacket that fit like it was made for him. He looked like the kind of man who belonged at a gala, not the guy who spent his mornings underneath cars and his evenings making boxed mac and cheese with his daughter. A black SUV waited outside the tailor's shop. The driver stepped out and opened the door without a word. Inside the car, Shane could feel his pulse thudding in his neck. The closer they got to the city, the harder it was to pretend he wasn't out of place. The venue sat in the heart of downtown, a towering marble building with glass doors that glowed under a canopy of golden lights. A red carpet stretched across the entrance. Cameramen shouted names as flashes popped in rapid bursts. Shane hesitated at the curb. Then the door opened, and there she was. Tessa wore a midnight blue gown that shimmered like the night sky. Her hair swept back, neckline low, earrings catching the light with every step. But it wasn't the dress or the heels that stunned him, it was the way she looked at him, like he was the only person she wanted to see. You clean up better than I imagined, she said, her voice low and warm. I feel like I borrowed someone else's life, Shane replied. You didn't, she said, extending her hand. You just stepped into mine. Inside, the ballroom was cathedral high and dripping in crystal chandeliers. Waiters in white jackets moved through the crowd balancing silver trays. A quartet filled the room with soft jazz, and every guest was dressed like a magazine cover. Shane kept close to Tessa as she introduced him to donors, partners, and city officials. Each handshake felt like a test. Some people smiled politely. Others blinked when they heard his name. One man, a hedge fund executive with 2 white teeth, leaned in and said, "So how do you two know each other?" Tessa didn't flinch. He saved my life. That shut him up. They made their way to a table near the stage. Shane sat beside her, grateful to be off his feet, unsure if he'd ever get used to this kind of air. Tessa leaned in. You're doing fine. He gave her a sideways glance. I feel like everyone's trying to figure out what I'm doing here. They can wonder all they want, she said. I know exactly why you're here. He stared at her, unsure which part of this night made less sense, how easily she moved through this world, or how easily she'd invited him into it. When the speeches began, Shane listened to Tessa take the stage. She spoke without notes, her voice steady and clear. She talked about building housing in underserved areas, about reinvesting in communities like the one Shane lived in. She wasn't just rich, she had vision. And the room listened. After the applause, she stepped down and returned to his side. You didn't tell me you do that kind of work, Shane said quietly. You didn't ask, she replied. I thought I was just a charity case. Her face hardened slightly. If you really believe that, then you don't know me at all, he hesitated. That's not what I meant, I brought you here because I wanted you to see who I am when I'm not running from meetings or collapsing in parking lots. He looked at her. Then let me ask now, why do you do it? Tessa folded her hands, her expression unreadable. Because I grew up watching my father build things that only benefited people already at the top. I promised myself I'd do it differently. Shane studied her. That's not the kind of promise most people keep. I'm not most people, he believed her. Later, as the gala wound down, Tessa took his hand and led him up a back staircase to the rooftop garden. The air was cooler up there, quieter. Fairy lights wound through trellises, and the city skyline stretched endlessly in every direction. I come up here when I can't breathe, she said, glancing out at the lights. Down there, everything moves too fast. He stepped beside her. So why stay in it? Because someone has to slow it down. She turned then, close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her eyes. Tonight wasn't about showing you off, she said. It was about showing you the part of me no one ever sees. He hesitated. And what if I still don't fit? Her voice dropped. Then I'll find a way to make space. He didn't kiss her, not yet, but the air between them shifted, charged, certain. It wasn't lust or infatuation. It was something deeper, something earned. They stood like that for a long time, the city humming below and the silence between them louder than any music inside. When the driver brought them back to the edge of Shane's neighborhood, Tessa walked him to the porch. Thank you, she said, for trusting me with tonight. He met her eyes. I didn't trust the world you brought me into, but I trust you. She touched his hand. That's enough for me. And then she stepped back into the car, leaving him standing in the quiet night, heart pounding for reasons he was only beginning to understand. The storm hit just after Gwen fell asleep. Rain hammered against the windows of Shane's apartment, wind curling under the doorframe. He stood in the kitchen, drying dishes while the TV murmured in the background. The place was quiet, too quiet, and he caught himself staring at the phone on the counter. It had been 5 days since the gala. Not a word from Tessa. She hadn't called, hadn't shown up. No car waiting outside the shop, no unexpected visits, no note. He hadn't realized how much space she'd carved into his life until she went silent. He turned off the faucet and leaned against the sink, trying to shake the tension building in his chest. A knock rattled the door. When he opened it, she stood there soaked through, her heels in one hand, hair plastered to her cheeks, breathing hard like she'd run the whole way. I walked, she said. He pulled her inside without a word. I couldn't wait anymore, she continued, rain dripping onto the kitchen floor. I tried. I told myself to stay away, that it was safer. What happened? She hesitated, her voice catching. My board found out about us. He didn't move. And they think you're a liability. His jaw tightened. Because I'm not rich. Because you make me unpredictable, she whispered. Because I stopped playing their game the minute I met you. He crossed his arms. So that's why you disappeared. I didn't disappear. I was fighting for something I wasn't sure I had a right to want. He looked away, jaw working. You could have just told me that. I know, she said, but I've spent years making decisions with my head. She stepped closer, this is the first time I've ever followed my heart. He met her eyes then, searching for the truth behind them. I've been offered a deal, she said. If I take it, I keep everything, my position, my shares, my power, but I'd have to walk away from you. Permanently? His voice came low. And the other option? I give up my seat at the company. Silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. You built that empire, he said. It's yours. She stepped closer. It's not worth anything if I'm alone when I get there. He shook his head. You don't have to give up your life for me. I'm not giving it up, she said firmly. I'm choosing a different one. His voice cracked. You're serious. I love you, Shane. The words landed between them like thunder. He stared at her, every wall he'd built, every reason he'd kept his distance, crumbling at once. I've never had anyone choose me, he said. Not like this. You have now. He stepped forward and pulled her into his arms, rain-soaked clothes and all. I love you too, he whispered into her hair. She held him tighter. Then let's build something new. 3 weeks later, Tessa handed in her resignation at the annual shareholders' meeting. She walked out of that boardroom without a single regret, leaving behind the Skyline office, the tailored titles, and the people who had only ever seen her as a name on a plaque. She didn't look back. Because Shane was waiting outside with Gwen on his shoulders, both of them holding a homemade sign that read, "Welcome to the real world, Tessa." She laughed, her heart fuller than it had ever been. They moved into a small house just outside the city, nothing extravagant. 3 bedrooms, a backyard Gwen could run through, and windows that caught the morning light just right. Tessa started a nonprofit focused on community redevelopment, her idea, Shane's vision, their shared purpose. No board, no suits, no politics, just people helping people. And every night, when the sun dipped low and the world quieted, Shane would wrap his arms around her on the porch swing and say the same thing. "I still can't believe I found you in a parking lot." And Tessa would smile, lean into him and say, "You didn't find me. You saved me." They never needed tuxedos or ballrooms again, just each other, a little girl with a paper crown, and the kind of love that didn't need to be earned with power or wealth. It was already theirs, completely, forever. The first time Tessa hosted a dinner in their new home, the oven caught fire. Shane burst into the kitchen with a towel, fanning the smoke detector while Gwen squealed with laughter from the hallway. Tessa stood in front of the charred remains of what was supposed to be a roast chicken, her arms crossed, expression unreadable. "I followed the recipe exactly," she muttered. "It looks like it followed you straight to hell," Shane replied, still waving the towel. She turned to him, completely deadpan. "I was trying to impress your mother," Shane grinned as the smoke finally cleared. "You could have served her takeout on paper plates and she'd still brag about you to her friends." "I wanted it to feel real," Tessa said, brushing soot off her blouse. "Like I belong here. You don't have to prove anything." He reached for her hand, still warm from the oven mitt. "You already do." She glanced down at their fingers, then up at him. "Even if I can't cook to save my life," he leaned in and kissed her on the forehead. "Especially then." Later that night, after they'd ordered Thai food and eaten it straight out of the cartons on the back porch, Shane's mother handed Tessa a worn recipe book with frayed corners and decades of margin notes. "Every woman in our family adds her own page," she said, placing the book in Tessa's lap. "Figured it's time you had yours." Tessa stared at it, stunned silent for a moment. "I don't know what to say." "Start with something simple," the older woman said, standing. "But if you ever write down that chicken disaster, I will personally tear the page out." Gwen burst into laughter again and ran off into the yard, chasing fireflies, her crown replaced by a headlamp Shane had given her for nighttime bug hunting. Tessa sat on the porch swing, the book in her lap, her eyes following Gwen. "I didn't know I could be this happy." "You didn't let yourself before," Shane said, easing down beside her. "You were too busy surviving." "I was always waiting for the other shoe to drop," she admitted. "Even after I left the company, I kept thinking I'd wake up and it would all vanish." He tilted his head. "Still do." "No," she said, resting her head against his shoulder. "Now I know it's real because I chose it." A few weeks later, she hosted her first fundraiser from their backyard. No ballrooms, no velvet ropes, no paparazzi. Just folding chairs, homemade lemonade, and a dozen families from the neighborhood gathered to support a community garden initiative she'd helped launch with Shane's help. After the last guest left, she stood in the kitchen, barefoot, watching Shane tuck Gwen into bed. Her laughter floated down the hallway, and Tessa leaned against the doorframe, arms folded not in defense but in awe. When Shane joined her, she didn't look away. "Do you ever miss it? The silence after Gwen goes to sleep," he teased. She nudged him. "I meant the old life. The high rises, the exclusivity, the freedom to do whatever you want." "I didn't have freedom," he said. "I had routine and responsibility, same thing every day until you." She looked up at him. "What changed? You made me want things I'd convinced myself I couldn't have, not the money. Not the status, just more." "Like what?" He pulled her closer, running his hands down her back. "This. A home full of noise and burnt food and people I actually want to come home to." She whispered against his neck. "We made this together. And we'll keep making it," he said. "One day, one disaster chicken at a time." That fall, Tessa opened a small development firm focused on rebuilding foreclosed properties into family homes. Shane handled the renovation side, hiring local workers, training teens from the community. They worked side by side, arguing over floor tiles and laughing through paint disasters, building something that had nothing to do with stock portfolios and everything to do with purpose. They got married under an oak tree in their backyard. Gwen wore a flower crown and carried a basket of petals, insisting she walk her dad down the aisle. Tessa wore a simple ivory dress with no veil, no train, just soft satin and bare feet. Shane wore suspenders and a tie Gwen picked out, bright red with little dinosaurs on it. There were no photographers, no press, just the people who mattered as they stood facing each other, the wind lifting leaves around their feet. Shane took her hands and said, "You were never a detour, you were the road." Tessa's eyes filled with tears, but her smile never wavered. "You didn't just save me, you saw me, and for the first time in my life, I didn't have to be anything but myself." They kissed as the sun dipped low and the guests erupted in cheers. That night, they danced under string lights strung between trees, barefoot in the grass, Gwen twirling between them until she collapsed in a pile of giggles. Inside the house they'd built with laughter, stubbornness, and late-night takeout, Tessa curled into Shane on the couch, her head resting on his chest. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't passed out that night?" she asked. "No," Shane said, brushing her hair back. "Because I can't imagine a world where we didn't find each other." She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I love you. I love you more," he whispered, "and I always will." The wind rustled the curtains as the stars blinked on outside. And in that quiet, perfect moment, the woman who had once stood at the top of the world knew, with absolute certainty, that she'd finally found what she'd been chasing all along, not power, not legacy, home.